All right, we are recording. Everybody, welcome to LDT 544 Instructional Design. It is Tuesday, February 22nd. We're going to get started here in Module 5, Learning Outcomes. But before we jump into that, I want to make a few announcements about the assignments. Of course, as you all know, the Synthetic Human Task Training Analysis, Instructional Analysis, and Content Map are due tonight at 11:59 p.m. So I will be available after class. If anybody has any questions, wants to run anything by me, wants to double check it before they submit it, that's fine. I did allow for multiple submissions on there, and I usually do for most assignments, allow for multiple submissions. So if you submit an assignment and you realize, oh, it's like hitting that send on the email only to realize that you made a typo or whatever, you want to take it back. You can do that for assignments. So if you submit an assignment, it's not the end of the world. You can resubmit it. You can say, hey, ignore that first one. Just take the last one. Be helpful when you do that to rename the file or say like version 2, something to denote that it is the second one. So I don't mix them up. I've had that happen before where I've downloaded the first one and graded that and then realized, oh, they sent a second one. And so please make it clear that in the file name that it's the second version or the second attempt. So yeah, that's due at 11:59 p.m. tonight. Now the eval and reply assignment for e-learning, that was going to be due tomorrow, but I'm going to push that to Sunday, the 27th. So you have a few more days to complete that. I know you're kind of bombarded with assignments, probably all focused on the instructional analysis and content map. So go ahead and get that one out of the way, and then you can focus on that e-learning reflect or eval and reply assignment. So yeah, that one would be good to do. And that again is like the previous learning machines and program learning, where you will reflect upon it, put your evaluation of the e-learning that you choose 2 of them, and then reply to someone else on which one they did. Just 50 words, I think, on somebody's reply. And I'll let you know again that those e-learnings, not all of them are good, and that's on purpose. Some of them are pretty bad, and I'd love to hear your detailed analysis or evaluation of the training, of the e-learning, if it was bad. Tell me how it was bad. And the synthetic task storyboard and design document and learning objectives, that's the next part of the synthetic human task training project. That is now open. It's going to be due on the 2nd of March. So that's next week. It's a week from tomorrow. And now I'm considering pushing that back just to give you a little more time, but I don't have a whole lot of room to push that back because I need to give you a full 2 weeks to work on the prototype that comes from that. And that's the final assignment of the synthetic human task training. So I want to give you a full 2 weeks because that's really the big one. That's the big part of the whole project. And then we're going to be running into midterm prep, the midterm, and then the final month of class is all for the final month and a little bit extra is all for your final projects, your client projects and final projects. So I've got a few clients already lined up, and they're going to be presenting, and you're going to be able to choose what project you want to work on for that. Should be pretty fun. There's a lot of really good stuff on that one. And but the synthetic human task training prototype assignment did go live today, so you can view that one and download the examples and try them out and see what you're looking to build from that. I kind of went over it last week, but you can now download it and try it out. And then last thing, Thursday, this Thursday is my normal office hours between 5 and 6, but I'm gonna have to cut it off at 5:30. I'm gonna be attending the ATD, the San Diego Mission Valley Association for Talent Development mixer. It's in Mission Valley, I think at BJ's Bar and Grill or something, or Pizzeria or wherever that is in Mission Valley. So that starts at 5:30. I'm gonna be at that. If anybody wants to attend, I'll be there, and that will count for your extra credit for the month of February if you wanted to hit that one up. And that's it for announcements for the beginning of class. We're going to go over that storyboard assignment a little bit later, as well as a few other announcements, but I want to jump into the presentations unless anybody has any questions. Oh, got somebody coming, joining the room. There we go. All right, let me share the screen. We'll get started. Two, share some sound. All right. All right, I hope you can all see the screen. Give me a thumbs up if you can, or tell me you can't. Great, thank you. And again, if you ever have, if there's any technical issue with my screen share, video or audio, if I sound robotic at all, please let me know. Don't let me go on class with bad audio or bad visuals, because I want to make those corrections if it ends up that that's happening. So yeah, tonight we're going to be going over learning outcomes, and we're going to be tackling this in 4 parts, really. We'll be reviewing learning objectives, as well as the pitfalls that to avoid when writing learning objectives. And then we're going to look at an instructional alignment model, and finally investigate methods to assess our learning objectives. So yeah, learning objectives. They are a short, just a short review of learning objectives. They are statements that declare the knowledge, skills, or abilities to be gained through instruction. Now, a proper learning objective is specific and clearly defined. It must be observable, which means it can be perceived or measured in some capacity, and it should be appropriate to the learning goal. It has to contribute to the fulfillment of that goal, and also lastly, it must be short term in that it can be completed during the instructional period. So that could be for the duration of a semester, or duration of a course, or duration of just a lesson. So whatever it might be, the term of the instructional period, the learning objective must be completed in that time frame. You wouldn't have a learning objective be something that's achieved over the career, someone's career or lifetime or multiple years. Typically about 6 months at max, you would want to do that, or have a learning objective completed in. Ideally, you want to have it completed in a much shorter time. In fact, the shorter time period it is to complete the learning objective, that means the more focused the instruction is, and the more you can get out of it. So yeah, now goals, on the other hand, being much more ambiguous, you can have those over longer term. Now, the 4 components of a good learning objective, again, this is a review from 540 if you took that class, is the ABCDs, A being the audience. Those are the people that will achieve the result. B being the behavior, just the action or performance. C is the condition, the resources or constraints of the performance, and D, degree, the criterion for success. Now, this is kind of the academic learning layout of objectives. You want to note all of these things, but in the real world, we typically jump over audience. We don't really put that written into the learning objective, simply because it's typically pretty obvious who the audience is. And if you are constantly reminding your stakeholders in reviews of the training who the audience is, they're going to kind of start rolling their eyes and get a bit aggravated. So you can drop audience off whenever you are presenting your objectives, but it is good to still have that in mind. In fact, a lot of learning objectives, especially enabling learning objectives, which we'll get in shortly, you don't even put into the training. I mean, you consider them, you put them in your design documents, but you won't necessarily let the learners know what those enabling learning objectives are, because there could be many, 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 depending on the size of the course. In one particular course I think I have like 20 different enabling learning objectives. So I'm like, I'm not going to bombard them with all of these. I'll just give them the big terminal ones, and we'll talk about the difference between terminal and enabling learning objectives shortly. But yeah, the big items that you want to focus on is the behavior, condition, and degree. That is the most important parts of a learning objective, because without the behavior, they're not going to know what to do. Without the condition, they don't know what are the constraints or resources or what they have to work with. The learner has to work with to do the training, or to show the performance. And then lastly, what degree of success, and that could be anywhere from you must achieve it's usually a numerical value value, something that's measurable, or it could be, we'll get into it. You'll see some examples of learning objectives and what degree is. Now, objectives versus outcomes, you see them frequently used right next to each other, and a lot of people kind of confuse the two, and they are very, very similar. But there are some key differences, and the learning objectives are typically prescriptive. It is what is intended. So you will write training with an objective in mind. This is what you are setting out to complete in the training. But an outcome is descriptive. It's what actually happens. Now, ideally, learning objectives and learning outcomes are the same. But when they're not, that could be because the instruction is faulty. So if you want to be able to set out to achieve a particular objective, you want the outcome to show that objective has been complete. But if it doesn't, then you didn't do things quite right. Unless you achieve, or the learner achieves more outcomes or they achieve the objectives in the outcomes, but then achieve even more outcomes than what was intended. And sometimes that is the case, and that's okay. We've all been in classes and have probably learned something that we didn't intend to learn, or the class didn't set out to teach us, and that is a learning objective or a learning outcome. I'm sorry, that's a learning outcome that wasn't necessarily the class wasn't necessarily designed to do, and that's okay. But as long as you achieve those specific objectives that it was set out, then that's what's really important. All the extra stuff, that's kind of, the bells and whistles, icing on the cake, and some of the most important learning does come from that. But if you are not achieving those specific objectives that you set out to achieve, then the instruction has been faulty. Now, there are 3 domains of learning: cognitive, which includes intellectual skills, strategies, and verbal information. An example of a cognitive learning objective would be this: given a description of a plant, the student will be able to identify that plant as demonstrated verbally or in writing. It's all cognitive. It's what's in their head. It's all based on knowledge. So yeah, that's solely in the cognitive domain. Now, psychomotive is the next domain. That's physical action, reflexes, hand-eye coordination. Example of a psychomotive learning objective would be: provided a soccer ball and goal, the player will be able to kick the ball into the goal at 40 feet 8 times out of 10. And you notice there that all of those ABCDs are in that learning objective. You have A, audience, which is the player. B is the behavior will be able to kick the ball into the goal. And C is condition, and that is provided a soccer ball and goal. That is the condition. Those are the elements that are available to them. And the degree at 40 feet 8 times out of 10. So that's how that one breaks down with the ABCDs. And the cognitive one, you also have that. Given a description of a plant, that it would be the condition. The student, audience, behavior is will be able to identify that plant. And that's a big thing about behavior. It's usually associated with some type of verb, such as identify, or here is kick the ball. That is the behavior we want, the objective. And then lastly, on the cognitive one, the condition, demonstrated verbally or in writing. So that's how the ABCDs are broken down. And then the last domain is affective. These are skills and dispositions for emotional action and responses. So an example of an effective learning objective would be: during the morning 5-minute meeting, the employee will choose to participate by asking relevant questions or providing insights into the subject discussed. And that is actually a learning objective I used in a training on conducting successful 5-minute meetings. trainings, this is supervisor training. Every morning, supervisors, before every shift, supervisors must conduct a 5-minute meeting with their crew and to identify or to let them know about safety concerns and tasks at hand and events that are taking place. And we asked that the employees, that they get the employees to participate in this. And so we want so it's all effective. We're not asking them to show some cognitive skill or psychomotive skill. We're asking them to be motivated in participating in this 5-minute meeting. So that's the ideal action right there, is choose. They choose to participate. And so that would be the behavior. The condition is during the 5-minute meeting. Of course, the audience is the employee, and the degree is asking relevant questions or providing insight into the subject discussed. Now, there are taxonomies. We're all very familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, and that is in the cognitive domain, but there are taxonomies for psychomotive and affective domains, and I highly recommend checking them out. They are very helpful for when you're designing training to meet those in those domains. Now, the taxonomies that I've seen for those, and it's a little out of scope this class because we're more focused on the cognitive domain in this class, but the Bloom's taxonomy, or not, sorry, just the taxonomies for those other domains, they are not as structured. There's actually a few different ones depending on who can, like, I guess, who designed it and who tweaked it. In my research, I found a few different ones, especially for psychomotive. So find one that looks good. I'll see if I can find some that I recommend. But there are out there. I highly recommend checking them out if you are creating training, or even if you're not creating training. It's just a good thing to be considerate of when designing any training, even when you're dealing with the cognitive domain, because as I say, a unmotivated learner is no learner at all. You have to be motivated, you have to be engaged, and so you get that engagement by diving into that affective domain often. So I highly recommend checking those out. And of course, if you're developing psychomotive skills, you're going to need those. All right, let's go into terminal and enabling objectives. Now, terminal objectives are objectives that cover the overall learning for the instructional event. All right, it's like a step down from goals. So they do have they have the ABCDs, but they are not necessarily super specific. Enabling, I mean, they are specific, but they are a little bit broader than the enabling objectives, and those are the incremental learning steps that lead to the terminal objective. And we'll use the example of the fire safety consciousness class from when we did our instructional analysis and a couple modules ago, and dive into some of the objectives for that one. And so for fire safety consciousness, we'll look at this section on reporting. So overall, the goal of the training is to be conscious about fire safety. All right, but that is ambiguous. There's no real specific objective or specific action, behavior. All that's, we don't need it for a goal. It's just very broad. So that one we don't have to worry too much about when getting those ABCDs. But for the terminal objective of that would be when a fire happens, employees will be able to report the fire and evacuate. All right, so that is the terminal objective of this particular section in the fire safety consciousness course. Now, there has to be enabling objectives that feed into that, because there's quite a few things that are necessary to achieve that terminal objective. And one such example would be this one. During a fire, the employee will be able to navigate to the emergency meeting point using the most direct route. So you see how that enabling objective it feeds into that terminal objective. So if you're able to complete that one, you're now attributing to the terminal objective, and then a terminal objective attributes to the goal. Now, let me look at my notes here. Now, It is, as I mentioned earlier, it isn't necessary to inform the learner of all the enabling objectives that you might have, because there could be so many. But for the sake of your design documents, you should list those down and have them noted and keep them in mind, because that'll be very important to maintain instructional alignment. And we're going to get into that shortly. But in this meantime, we have a little knowledge check. So let me get the polls going. There we go. All right, so this is about the learning domains. Which learning domain do the following learning objectives fall into? So it'd either be cognitive, psychomotive, or affective. Again, if you're not able to see the poll, you can just put your answers in chat. What do you think about? Are you feeling something? Are you thinking something? Or are you physically doing something? Wait for a few more to participate, but we got some time. I'm gonna wrap this up in about another 10 seconds. All right, and the poll, share the results, looks pretty good. Although I wish Zoom would differentiate the colors better. Two different shades of blue for cognitive versus psychomotive. Yeah, so this first one, supervisors will be able to identify 3 lean wastes. If you're not familiar with lean waste, it's a type of work waste, not necessarily physical trash. But is a type of waste, manufacturing waste, in their work area from at least 2 different categories from the next report date. The key item there is identify. So if you're identifying something, you're using your brain, very much in the cognitive domain there. And number 2, looks like everybody got that one right. Yeah, in discussion groups, the students will choose to share that keyword, choose to share one personal story related to the plight of the main character from the book. Yeah, definitely in that affective domain. And then the last one, with an ergonomic keyboard, data entry personnel will be able to type at least 80 plus words a minute from the company report document. Very physical, you're typing, and so that would fall squarely into psychomotive. So very good. Looks like everybody did pretty well on that. And all right, next section, of course. Next section we'll go into is pitfalls. Now, these are the pitfalls that people often run into when designing or writing your learning objectives. And these will sometimes make or break your training, because if you do not have well-written learning objectives, you have no real way to ensure that the learner is completing them. And in some environments, that could lead to actual legal issues. There are legal concerns in corporate world about negligent training. And if you are not training correctly, you don't have your learning objectives written out to the performance necessary, particularly, actually I deal with this often, about safety training. Someone gets hurt, They ask, were they trained? Yes, they were. They signed the roster, but what were they trained exactly? Well, we'll show you the content. Okay, did you assess them? Did you verify that they completed that particular training? And to what degree did you do that? And we're like, okay, now we're looking at learning objectives. So, so it is important to have well-written learning objectives that your design is based off of, and that the assessment is done off of, so that you can prove the results of the training. And if you use these if you fall into these pitfalls, you're gonna have problems. You're gonna have problems with them. So you have to avoid these following pitfalls: fuzzy behavior, inappropriateness, semantics, and lastly is the teaching. Now, fuzzy behavior is when there is no discernible behavior or performance, nothing that is concrete, nothing that you could see or view. There's just no way of knowing if the learner is successful in performing. So this happens when you have words such as understand, and this is a big one. I see this all the time. Understand the duties and responsibilities associated with the role. How do we know if they understand it? You know, if there is something specific that would indicate understanding, then we'll use that word. You know, oh, they'll be able to identify, or they'll be able to explain, they'll be able to describe. Well, use that word instead of understand, because understand is very fuzzy and ambiguous. What means one thing to someone, another thing to another person. Another one, an example is comprehend. Comprehend the differences between products. Or how about know how to make a sales call? How do we know when we know something? Or can we prove that we know something, and to what degree? And then this is my personal bugbear. This one just drives me nuts. Gain experience of safety risks. I've spoken with many subject matter experts, and I ask them, well, so what do you need from the learners? What do you need from these trainees in order for them to succeed at being safety conscious? And like, oh, well, they don't need training, they just need experience. I can't write experience into a learning. I can't assess experience. I need something more specific. So, so those are some of the fuzzy behaviors that we should avoid. Now, using a real learning objective action words is really important. And a quick internet search on Bloom's taxonomy or learning objective action words, you'll come up with a wealth of resources on which ones to use in each area, in each levels of Bloom's taxonomy. So I highly recommend picking one of those up, printing one out, putting it on your desk. I have action words for all three domains, just pinned up on my desk, and I reference them all the time, just to when I'm trying to figure out what is the exact performance that I'm looking to achieve here from my learners. I'll look up and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I need them to explain this, I need them to describe this, I need them to demonstrate this. So having that readily available just to jog your memory or jog your thought patterns, do some brainstorming, really helpful. Highly recommend it. All right. The next pitfall is inappropriateness. All right. This relates to any objective that does not pertain to the goal. And I see this often. So like a hazard recognition course. A learning objective be to appreciate the role OSHA, that is the Occupational Safety Health Administration, plays in maintaining a safe working environment. Yeah, it's a very noble learning objective. I think it's important to appreciate that role OSHA plays, but does that learning objective truly enable the goal or enable the learner to be able to recognize hazards? And the answer would be no. They can appreciate it and not be able to recognize a hazard. So that one is not very appropriate to the particular training. Another example is in retail sales. We want to teach people how to do sales training. All right, well, let's let them identify the lunch break times. What does that have to do with anything? That doesn't have to do with them selling things. I mean, maybe in some weird, as I've said before, there are no absolutes. You might find some training in which the sales, maybe it's like, oh, it's important when you're doing sales to take breaks, to relax and get yourself out of that mode. And then so you can come back. That could be possible. But for the sake of actually achieving a sale and meeting a lot of the objectives of sales, you don't, identifying the lunch breaks is not necessary. How about drywall installation? You're trying to teach people how to do a drywall install. Well, let's have them analyze the current market value for drywall installation services. Has no point. No point in showing them how to install drywall. So these learning objectives do pop up frequently, and it's often a case of the most often cases that I see these pop up is when an instructor is trying to get a good test results from their learners. When I first came on with NASCO, I had to tackle what's called the MEWP training, Mobile Elevated Work Platform. Those are the boom lifts and scissor lifts. And I sat in on the class the instructor was teaching before I had any, just first time sitting down to see what are they doing. And I sat through the entire training. It was just a video and a little bit of chat. And then they took a test. And on the test, it asked, where was the elevated work platform, the scissor lift, made? Where was it made in the United States? What was the town or the city and state? And I'm like, wait a second, how does that enable someone to use this device? How does it enable them to work with it safely? It doesn't. But I found out they just wanted they wanted to have a test result that shows, hey, that answer is easy to find in the video and in one of the handouts they gave. And so they can always rely upon people getting that answer correct. It brings up the test scores and makes the instructor and the training look good. But it had no point in the objective of the training. So when you're designing your learning objectives, writing your learning objectives, make sure that they're appropriate to the goal of the training. Semantics. Semantics is overly verbose and complicated learning objectives that lack clarity or have little to no meaning. If our learners are suffering from cognitive overload from just reading the learning objectives, we have a seriously bad start here. And this is a trademark of a designer who does not know what they're doing. If you can't you can't bedazzle them with your brilliance, you end up baffling them with your, So you want to avoid an objective that looks something like this. Leverage the current trends and a long-term sustainability to determine optimal manufacturing outcomes. We have to dissect that. It's using a lot of kind of corporate jargon. And I've seen these sorts of learning objectives. Or how about this one? Manage the ratio of compensation to losses so that operating revenues are high when compared to operating expenses. Okay, I have to read that a few times, and maybe I can pull out a learning objective from there, but it's really difficult to see. And now this last one, develop a deep appreciation for the acceptance of differing ideas in a diverse workplace where questions can be asked in the harbor of psychological safety. Actually, I'm a firm advocate of psychological safety. I think it's crucially important, and where people can ask diverse questions. But that learning objective is just way too complicated for its proposed, hopefully its intended purpose. So it's just a run-on sentence. Let's keep it short and sweet as possible, to make so that when the learner sees the objective, and even in the stakeholders and the subject matter experts see these objectives, they can say, oh yeah, we can totally see that. We can totally understand that. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to keep your learning objectives like too simple. There is a certain level of complexity that is necessary for some performances. I've had to write some very complicated learning objectives because it was a complicated task. But over complicating it when a simpler way of writing it is available, do that. Don't try to make it overly complicated when it's not necessary. And this next pitfall is called the teaching. And this is when you insert the teachings or the instructional material or the teacher into the learning objective. All right. You do not want to insert your instruction into the objective. And this one feels a little strange a lot of times because we must prepare the learner to perform outside of the classroom, away from the instruction. We want them to not be like just coming out of a classroom or just having that instruction in their hand or that book or that e-learning to be able to perform the task. That's usually not the case when they're going to be performing. So you make sure that the objective does not talk about or have anything written about the instructor or anything like that. So something like this: the instructor will show you how to pass the final exam. What is the performance that we're looking for outside of the classroom? Are they going to be doing final exams often? Although there is sometimes, and like I said before, there's always exceptions to this rule. That if your instruction that you are designing is specifically designed, the goal is very specific to show someone how to pass a test, an other test, then that might be a reasonable learning objective. And I've done that before. We have tower crane operator certifications that are done by it's actually national. It's national tower crane associations. They provide licenses for using those giant hammerhead cranes you see putting buildings together. Well, we don't do the exam for that, but we do a preparatory training, so that the learning objective for that training is to show them how to pass that exam. And that may be kind of contrary. It's like, well, why aren't you showing them how to actually use the crane? And it's because when we did the analysis on the actual test that was being done, the test doesn't even prove the performance of using the crane. I found that the test questions were out of date. They don't show any kind of behavior. They're not assessing any behavior. It was really just a compliance. It was just a compliance sake. So that's why we wrote the learning objectives for that particular course on preparing them how to pass this exam. Other than that, you wouldn't have that kind of learning objective. Here's another example. The learners will complete their project to the satisfaction of the teacher. We're not the ones that need to be satisfied as teachers and instructors. We're looking to empower our learners to perform to maybe their satisfaction or to a particular criteria that is necessary for the performance, not to our satisfaction. So that one would not be appropriate at all. And this last one, after the 2-hour ILT, it's instructor-led training, the participant will be able to perform safely. And they're not going to necessarily have that 2-hour ILT every single time that they need to perform safely. So you would not put that ILT in there. Now, there is, an exception. There's always exceptions. Let's say you're designing training for skydiving company, or a kind of entertainment skydiving, where you get people that come and they go up in an airplane and they jump out of an airplane with the instructor and everything like that. There may be a mandatory training that everyone must go through every single time before they jump out of the airplane for those individuals. In that very select circumstance, okay, you could put in there about a ILT being part of the learning objectives. It's very similar to you could actually, here's another exception, which I don't really even consider an exception, a job aid. A job aid would be considered a part of the conditions of the learning objective. So provided a job aid on this task, they would be able to perform successfully. That is okay, because the job aid would be potentially available to them when they're doing the task. I think Rebecca Frazee talks about using the job aid when you go to a supermarket and you're having somebody checking out at the and the grocery store clerk has that Rolodex dial of all the produce item numbers. Well, that's a job aid, and they could write that into learning objectives. So given a Rolodex of produce item numbers, the cashier will be able to find 5 commonly purchased produce and enter in the numbers to the register. That is an okay learning objective, and it speaks to a particular training element. But if that training element isn't available or is not planned to be available during the actual performance, do not include it. Do not include it. All right, we got another test here. So pitfalls. All right, so let's do a knowledge check on those learning pitfalls. Just identify which pitfalls this falls into. Oh, yes. There you go. Sure thing. If you want to take on a little extra challenge on this knowledge check, you can try to rewrite these in chat to where they would be appropriate, or they would be correct. So we got a few mixed opinions. I'm gonna give you another few 15 seconds on this one. Yeah, there could be multiple possible. Depends on how you look at them. All right. If you haven't already answered, get your answers in. I'm going to be closing this out. All righty. And let's share those results. So yeah, the first one, in a biology, this is in biology course, students will be able to accurately describe their observations in a science journal after completing a week-long terrarium lesson unit. This squarely falls pretty squarely into the teaching, on inserting your teaching material into it, because you got a terrarium lesson that shouldn't necessarily be in an actual learning objective. Now, if that was changed to being something along the lines of what was I thinking about? Some people be able to accurately describe their science after completing or after viewing the nature or some other environment that is not the training, then that would be okay. That would be fine. But that, as for including the lesson unit, that should be avoided. Let's see, is there anybody that said the teaching? Yeah, most people said fuzzy behavior. I don't know, a little bit. It's describe is a pretty decent a verb. Behavior verb there that is used very frequently. If it doesn't list here exactly how they will describe it, I should say in a science journal. So that's that kind of infers that it's going to be written. So not so much fuzzy, more along the lines of the teaching. Now, in this other one, creative writing, students will be able to apply their knowledge of the writing process to a peer editing session in which they provide at least 5 peers with valid feedback. This one almost hits all of them. Actually, it does hit all of the ABCDs. You have students will be able to apply. You can see when somebody applies something, and then in a peer session, so that's a condition in which they provide at least 5 peers with valid feedback. Those are pretty good conditions and degrees. The only thing is they kind of invalidate this this objective by putting their knowledge, apply their knowledge. They could just say the students will be able to know the writing process. It's I see this often. It's like apply is a perfectly fine verb to use. I see that used all the time. I've used it all the time because we want them to apply some kind of demonstrable skill or demonstrable task. They can apply it, but knowledge is in your head. You can't really necessarily see that. So when people use those things together, they'll be able to demonstrate their comprehension. They'll be able to show or indicate their knowledge or whatever it might be. That is still a fuzzy. If you have a fuzzy word in there of no comprehend, it's in the fuzzy realm. You want to avoid it. So yeah, it more falls into that one. Semantics, I would agree with semantics as well. I see many people put about semantics. That is a bit wordy and lengthy. I think it could, especially when you say apply their knowledge, cut that down into something simpler, but knowledge just cancels it out altogether as being a fuzzy behavior. Subject will be able to use a rubric. Yeah, you can have rubric, maybe. Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's like that rubric. Yeah, I guess the conditions as illustrated in the rubric would be okay because they're not necessarily going to use. That's a rubric is an instructional tool. Sorry, that might have been a direct message, so you may not all be seeing that. So Aaron suggested that in the creative writing one, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, that the student will be able to use a rubric to edit 5 peers during the 5-peer editing session. And
yeah,
yes.
Oh, I'll just explain really quick if you want.
Sure, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was just trying to figure out a way to apply their knowledge in a more concrete way, so that you know whether or not they have applied their knowledge.
Yeah, and
so
you're
kind of my thought process behind that.
No, you're on the right track. You're on the right track because a rubric is actually a set of standards, and a standard is a condition. And so you can reference the standards that are in the rubric by speaking of the rubric, but not speaking directly that they'll have to use the rubric. So you could say something like this: the student will be able to demonstrate or they'll be able to edit the apply their insights or edit a student's writing by the standards as per the rubric. That would be okay. That would be okay. But if you say they will have the rubric, then it wouldn't work so well. So I hope that makes sense. But good question. That's a good question. And that actually does very much. I often have to write learning objectives that have the condition based on a standard that would have to be referenced. So, like OSHA standards or NAVC standards, and your company may have, whatever company you might work for, might have policies. Or if you're designing a learning objective for a K through 12 environment, there's often California state or wherever state you're in or wherever state standards for that particular topic or that particular subject, and that would be okay to reference as long as you're not referencing the tool itself in the performance. Great question though. All right, let's talk about instructional alignment. Let's see, what time are we running at here? Of course, I'm presenting. Okay, we got a couple minutes before we jump in before we take a break. So instructional alignment. All right. So this is something I see happen quite frequently, especially in training that is continually edited and redesigned and redeveloped. And so I've kind of coined this term based off of some Japanese that means koko. It says kokoro, and which means the alignment of heart, body, mind, and spirit. And in order to find peace within ourselves, we must have kokoro. And so these things, heart, body, mind, and spirit, must be aligned. Now, in instruction, there is also a kokoro, and that is the alignment of goals, objectives, activities, and assessments. Only instructional kokoro may be achieved if you get that, if our training finds peace when you have that alignment, and those things get disaligned very easily. So during the design and development process, you can have your goal in mind. You start doing your design. Your goal gets a little kind of pushed to the side a little bit, so you can create those learning objectives that meet all those criteria that we've been discussing. So it's like, oh, man, it's not going to be perfect, and since the goal is a little bit fuzzy, always we're a little bit off, but we're still in that realm. We're still within that band, so we're okay. But then when you start developing your activities, then you start saying, well, okay, we can design our activities to align with these learning objectives pretty well, but that goal suddenly starts changing and getting out of whack. All right, and we may even leave an orphaned objective. It's like, oh man, we have this learning objective, and we don't have any activities that we can use to get that learning objective across. So you know what, we're going to have to push that objective aside or forget about it. It's just not part of our instructional model anymore. We did our instructional context analysis and realized that we don't have the resources, the instructional resources, to hit this learning objective. So let's just push it aside. Could happen. And then when we get to assessing the training, we're like, all right, let's just create a test that assesses the activities that we developed, and let's try to hit those learning objectives, but we don't get them all together, and students are failing the assessment, and we're like, okay, the students are failing, let's make it easier. I don't know if you heard that expression, if at first we don't succeed, we redefine success. So end up making the assessment easier so the student could pass. Well, now you're out of whack. You're not getting that objectives anymore. You're not getting those goals. And they're like, okay, well, let's redesign. Let's bring those activities in alignment with that assessment. But now those goals are way far gone. We've ignored those objectives. And sure, we're getting great grades. The students are passing the exam, but the ultimate performance is not being achieved. So we got problems, and that's where we have to get realigned. Now, this is kind of an extreme circumstance here, but I have seen it happen. Like I said, with that mobile elevated work platform training I was working on, they were assessing people's knowledge or be able to identify or list where the elevated work platform was made and the company that made it. But it was all about using it. So that they wanted to get that good grade, but they totally missed the objective and the goal of the training. Now, in order to get that alignment in place, we must use tools. All right. And that's where things like our content maps and design documents get involved. They will help that alignment take place. So whenever there is first off, the content map will typically show the objectives of the storyboard design documents. They'll show the objectives, both terminal and enabling. This is why it's important. Even though we're not going to let the learner know about all those enabling objectives, we're going to write them down and have them in these documents, so that whenever we design our assessments and activities, we can always go back and refer to them and say, hey, what objectives are we truly hitting with these assessments? Or are we just asking questions, easy questions to make the students feel good, or are they actually achieving a result that we need? So that's why those design tools and keeping them up to date with how the training changes is important. In fact, adjustments is where things can go very wrong, and you will do lots of adjustments. In fact, this course, I was just thinking about it on my commute this afternoon about how I wanted to change some elements of this course that we're currently in for next year. And I'm like, okay, I want to change this a little bit, make some slight changes here. And I think, well, that I have to go look through the rest of the course to make sure that everything's going to take in alignment. But I'm going to have to do that, go back to my design document for this course. And in fact, I might even be able to show it to you sometime. I have a massive outline of this course that details what everything's happening, what are the learning objectives of each of our modules, what are the enabling learning objectives, what are activities that are planned, when are the readings, when we do assigned readings, when are they all coordinated with what we're talking about. So I have that all planned out. And so when I make changes, I have to go back to those documents and reflect those changes there. Because if I just go and change the presentations, well, that's not gonna that may not let me see how that impacts other elements of the course and maintains that kokoro. So when you are doing adjustments, particularly with subject matter experts, when they come through and do a review of the training and want to make their changes, or there's like this in this particular one, this is what we're looking at right now is a design document that I and my mentor had created, I use it it's a storyboard. It's basically a storyboard that lists what each of this is part of an e-learning. Actually, this was part of a video, but it can be used part of e-learning. And so I was developing out this training on timekeeping software, and I found out that the demo that we were using to train lost some features. These features weren't available. So I'm like, okay, I won't be able to put that part of the training. So I had to go and make the changes across the board. If the goal was to achieve this one result or have this learning objective achieve this result that demo was needed in, I needed to go back to my stakeholders and say, we can't train that unless you get that demo, that portion of the demo put back in. If that's not possible, we're going to need to figure out another way to get that information across. If it's not through the current training that we're developing, we'll have to do something different. So that's why it's important to track those changes. In fact, if you use Microsoft Word and you're using design documents, this particular document was designed in Microsoft Word, you can do track changes in there to keep an eye on when things change, who changes them in your organization. If your office system is connected with your organization, sometimes when you make a change, it'll note, oh, this person made the change on this date. Then you can go back to the source and say, hey, why did you change this? So you can just track all that in case there's ever an accountability audit, which happens quite a bit. And they're like, hey, you changed the training. Why did you do that? A subject matter expert made that change. When did you do that? You did it at this date. Oh, well, I'll go talk to him about that or her about it. And so it happens. But the important thing is that when changes occur, you see how you have to take a look at your design documents to see how those changes impact the entire training, particularly with assessments. You go change content in the presentation or the delivery of material, or if you're no longer testing to that, and you have a question that is no longer valid, you got to take that question out or change the question to be more valid. In fact, I have to do that. We're going to have a pop quiz not too far from now. Not today, but it's coming up. I was looking at the pop quiz coming up and also the midterm, and I'm like, oh, I've changed the course and there's a couple questions here that no longer apply, or I have to change the wording on them. So that's a perfect example of maintaining that kokoro by reviewing all of the elements of the training to make sure that they keep in alignment. All right, we're about at 6 o'clock right now. Yes, we're right at 6 o'clock. Brilliant. So let's take a break and then we'll come back and talk about assessments. All right, so I got right at 6 o'clock, 6:01. So let's come back at 6:11. 6:11. We'll see you then. Recording. There we go. Without verifying that information is understood and performed successfully, it is not training. You must assess it. And so, like the comedian, if you're familiar with the late comedian Mitch Hedberg, when he says, when somebody hands me a flyer, it's like they're saying, "Here, you throw this away." That's what we're basically doing if we just give out information without assessing the effectiveness. You're throwing away your training. All right, so there are three primary rationales to assessing training: verify the effectiveness, proving that ROI, the Kirkpatrick levels, as you said, providing feedback to the learner. That's another biggie. Is the learner won't know that they're performing correctly. So we want to make sure that they know that what they have done is accurate. Because if they say, okay, I took this test, and actually we're having that problem right now at NASCO with our safety training program because it's taking so long to grade our testing, that by the time, like, we have people do their written test and their practical assessment of their safety competencies at the end of the day, and then the very next day they go off to their work areas and we grade the papers, and we sometimes find that the learner did not do correctly, did not pass. So we have to go out and find them and do all this crazy stuff to get them back in and retrain them. So the learner will go out thinking, oh, I passed, I'm out working, I'm performing safely, not knowing that no, they did not learn the information. They're coming back, they think, oh, I did that correct, so I can do that out in production. No, that's not right. So providing feedback, letting them know how they did it is very important. Another way is motivating the learner. Another important thing is motivating the learner. Create urgency and raise the stakes. It helps to get them to pay attention. People are exceptionally bad at perceiving long-term benefits. A lot of learning has long-term benefits, and if we don't assess, or if we're able to assess them to let them know in those small increments, that helps motivate. If they say, oh, I'm going to learn this and become, over 4 years and become grand at the skill, let's say like instructional design or learning, being a training development specialist or professional, and it's going to take 2 years, 3 years, 4 years to do that, it may affect your motivation. But if you get these little tests, these little incremental, hey, I'm doing it, I'm doing okay, I'm doing it, it helps motivate and keep your interest and keep those goals of those long-term goals more tangible and you can see them. So very, very important to have that. But yeah, as I'm sorry, was that Erin that was speaking, or Brianna, about the assessing your training to find out if it's doing what it's supposed to be doing? That is absolutely important too. So I did not include that in here, but absolutely, yeah, to find out if you are doing a good job or your design is doing a good job. Absolutely. Now, there are three primary types of assessment. There are the diagnostics, and that's a kind of a pre-assessment. You evaluate the student's knowledge, skills, or abilities prior to the learning. And this can help to modify the course content to fit the needs of the learner. We all did that at the beginning of this class. We had our learning concepts diagnostic, and that provided me some input on where you're all coming from. Where are we going to need to dive in a little bit during this class to make sure that you know how to do these things? If I identified that the adult learning principle, andragogy and pedagogy, was something that we may need to touch in on. So that I was able to accommodate that. So yeah, diagnostic assessments, pre-learning, evaluates pre-learning. Now, formative assessments. This helps form the learning. They're tools that provide feedback that the student can use to learn more. And an example of that is in our knowledge checks that we do regularly in class, these polls and things. That would be a formative assessment. The results are anonymous. I think I can figure out who answered what. I normally don't look, though. I just want to kind of get a gauge of where everybody is at in the class on what we just talked about. So, so you're not getting graded on those knowledge checks. They're there just to help you form the learning and also provide me some feedback as well. So those are formative. And then the last one, summative. This evaluates the learning outcome. Did we achieve our results? And this is representative in like our midterm that we'll be having just before the spring break. So that would be a summative assessment. This is where you will prove to me that you got the information and can show me and demonstrate that knowledge. Not to use a fuzzy word, but at least you'll be able to demonstrate that you have understood what we are trying to accomplish or what the objectives of this class are. So yes. Now, we also spoke about these other types of standards in, I think, last week's class about norm reference and criterion reference. And it is very important. So yeah, in the pedagogy versus andragogy, norm reference is typically used in pedagogy with children, while criterion reference is typically used in adult education. But there can be used in either, depending on what's going on. But the example of a norm reference would be like IQ tests, SATs, ACTs, things that are the scoring is where the scoring is relative to others that have taken the test. So you could take a norm reference test one day and get one score, and then take it another day and get a different score, based on who took it in your group, or what was the students that you're being compared against. So that is norm reference. Well, criterion reference is based strictly on a preset standard. So like a driving test. If you don't meet these particular performance standards, you don't pass. It doesn't matter how well the person did before you or how badly the person is going to do after you. You must complete these very specific items to the standard. That is it. So no room for change there. Now, norm reference tests typically require a large amount of data to create that norm. Yeah, it's sometimes hard. I mean, you might be able to do it with a classroom of students, 20, 30 students. That's a very small group, but it is possible. And so typically you'll do a much larger norm tested group to get your results. Well, criterion reference, you only need that standard. That's an acceptable performance, whatever that standard might be. And so yeah, norm reference testing, the changes due to the factors outside the learner's control, while criterion reference will always stay the same. Now, the question is, how do you decide which one to use? And it depends on the performance outcome you wish to achieve. If there is a specific criteria for success, and the learner, can the learner demonstrate, and the learner can such as like can they create a device, or can they complete a project? Can they put something together, something like that? That would be a very specific criteria. They complete it together to the specific criteria. Then that would be criterion reference. That would be the one to use. But if success is more ambiguous and often competitive, such as artistic creativity, could be sales performance, then you could use norm reference. I've even heard about some professors in business courses. They will use norm reference because each of the students are competing for the grade in the class, the best grade in the class. They created a competitive sales environment or competitive business environment. So there they use norm reference testing. Now, two criteria for effective assessments are validity and reliability. Now, validity means, does it accurately assess the learning objective? And we spoke about this with alignment and Kokoro. If your objective is to have the learner assemble a device, but you assess their knowledge of the inventor of the device, this is not a valid assessment. For reliability, is the assessment consistently applied? Learners should be able to achieve the same results in an assessment test if they apply their knowledge, skills, or abilities equally each time. So this is more on the criterion reference side. If there are other factors outside the control of the learner, that will change the results, and you have a problem. I could speak of experience on this. We do our universal shipyard hazard recognition assessments, which are real simulated environments with manufactured hazards, and the learners must identify these hazards and perform tasks. And we have an evaluator there checking them off on whether or not they identify particular hazards or perform the task correctly and safely. The problem happened when we first rolled out this program is that we had multiple evaluators, and some of them were assessing differently than others. They were checking off items or saying that they completed the skill or didn't complete the skill correctly, or even giving them directions different ways. And so there was a reliability issue, and we had to nip that in the bud and create very specific training for the evaluators so they can do it consistently every time. And then we vote on the imposter. Sorry, I'm not following Anna. What is that in reference to?
It's just a joke about an online game where you're on a spaceship performing tasks and someone is an imposter.
Yeah, that's real sus. That's real sus right there. All right. All right. So most assessment problems. So the problems that you would run into with validity and reliability, they could be resolved when creating good learning objectives. So if your learning objectives are clearly written and aligned with your goals, hitting these items and creating great assessment items is very easy. Oops. All right, when developing those knowledge-based assessments, so this is in that cognitive domain often, most often they're applied to, there are all these question types, and I'm sure you're all familiar with many of them, and I want to put some names to them so you can decide which ones would be best for your particular assessment. Now, ideally, I say that practical, hands-on, kinesthetic assessments are typically best, but we're not always able to do that, particularly when we're designing e-learning or having to do large wide-scale testing. You have to use these sorts of question types, and some are better than others for chosen content. And if you noticed in a lot of the knowledge checks we've been doing, I've kind of been mixing it up. We have some matching, we have some multiple choice, we have some multiple or single choice, true, false, things like that. So, so multiple choice, we're all pretty used to multiple choice. Single answer, now we have multiple response. That's when there could be multiple answers to questions. And then binary, true, false, 50-50 chance to get these correct. I like to avoid true, false in the strict binary sense, but I will let you know, and if you haven't already seen it in my quizzes yet, I will give a 4-question or 4-answer option true or false question. And typically that is, you have to decide if something is true or false because of a particular reason. And so it is possible to take a true or false question and turn it into one of the other ones. And I highly recommend doing that, because one problem with question types is, if somebody could get a multiple choice question with 4 answers right 25% of the time if they didn't know it. For true and false, they can get it right 50% of the time without actually demonstrating the knowledge. So it kind of comes into a 50-50, 25% chance you're not definitively sure that they're getting it. So if you try to up or lessen those chances of them guessing correctly by creating true or false questions with addendums on it to make it multiple choice or even more than 4 choices, do so as much as you can. But all of these sort of styles, they have issues. The learners could possibly use deductive reasoning to figure out what the answer is. I was always pretty good about taking multiple choice questions without actually knowing the content by figuring out, if a teacher misspelled one of the answers, I'm like, okay, that's probably not correct. And I'm sure you may have seen that tip for answering multiple choice questions on choose the longest answer. Whatever answer is the longest is typically the right answer. And those are kind of cheap methods, but it doesn't necessarily prove that they're meeting the learning objectives. So be careful with those. Be careful with those. Now, for an added level of difficulty, you could use fill in the blank. Or short answer. And this requires the learner to pull the knowledge from themselves. Now you don't give them a 25% chance on 4 options. They can put anything in there. They can put any answer in there. So they really have to demonstrate their knowledge about the content or write it all out. Now, what do you think is a problem with doing these types of questions, though? Any ideas? Grading, yeah. Logistics here. Logistics. Logistics can be a real problem when dealing with fill in the blank and short answers, because you may have to read all of that. And if you are, teaching, let's just pull it out to MOOCs, massive open online courses, and you're designing training for those, and you have thousands of people taking your training and submitting fill in the blank and short answer questions. Are you going to go through and read them all? That's going to be tough. Now you could use some AI algorithms to get the right answer, but I've seen often, I don't know if you, I sometimes hit the memes Reddit pages, and one of the things are those infuriating Reddits subreddits where people will write in a fill in the blank question and they'll like not capitalize one of the letters, or not use or they'll use a synonym of the word and they mark it wrong, but it's like the exact same thing. Those are some problems you can run into. Sarah says in the chat, we had short answers in our research class survey that went out to 50 people, made it so hard to track the themes of the answers. Yeah, it's really difficult. I have to do, luckily, actually, I'm going to be running a leadership class on Thursday in which we do evaluations, and I get written feedback from the participants of the training. And luckily, it's a smaller course. I only got like 20 people in it at a time. But I imagine if it was a much larger course, reading these all, not even short answers, sometimes there's paragraphs, just drive me nuts. So what I end up doing though is putting that data into some type of usable format. They write it out, then I go and retype it. It's only 20 evaluations, so I retype it in a program, and that'll feed me results that I can report out. But yeah, fill in the blanks, short answers, they're great for assessments, or not great, let's say better than the multiple choice and true and false ones, but they increase the complexity of grading. Oh, and matching. Matching is another pretty good one. It's similar to multiple response, but deductive reasoning can play a much bigger role in this. And if somebody knows two of the options, they can kind of maybe figure out the other. And after that happens, this is one of the ways I kind of cheated tests, is I would allow the test questions, I would learn the content as I was doing the test. And so using deductive reasoning, it's like, oh, they're giving me these two choices. Well, are these multiple choices? Well, that gives me some kind of deductive knowledge into these other questions that I've already answered, and I know I'm in the right realm, so I'll guess this and reduce it really down to a 50% chance. There's all sorts of ways that smart test takers could use to kind of cheat the system without actually proving that your instruction did it. So be very careful on anything that can be left for multiple or deductive reasoning. Labeling, another great, excellent method for just base level identification skills, but it can be used for higher thought process, such as evaluation and analysis. They label, they have to evaluate a particular thing and place a label on it based on that evaluation, and go how they would classify that item. So that's a good way to do it as well. So evaluate could up that skill, go up that Bloom's taxonomy. Now sequencing, another good one for processes and procedures. Again, suffers some of the same problems from matching, but sequencing can be very, very good for creating those. Put these procedures in the proper order. In fact, I just threw together. I'm just goofy like this. My kids are their teacher gave them assignment to watch Star Wars, the Star Wars: A New Hope, and so I put a test together for them on Star Wars: A New Hope, where they would have to put the events. My kids are very young, and put I listed a bunch of main plot points on this test, and they had to put them 1, 2, 3 in what order they did, and it got them really engaged with the movie because they wanted to get them in order. So things like that, sequencing events, processes, procedures, that's really fun, and can be very helpful for getting that information across or assessing those issues. Oh yeah, there you go. Those are called Harvey balls, by the way. I learned that those whenever you see those kind of clock things, they're called Harvey balls. Hotspotting, great tool for integrating graphics and identification. So yeah, you can just put a picture of something and they'll have to identify where in the picture is this particular thing located, or can you identify where is the, or list a bunch of tools that would be identifying, but just give them a map and say, where's the problem with this map or picture. Then long essay, long answer essay. Again, that's even a bigger problem for grading until they're able to create. Actually, I think there are some pretty good AIs out there that can potentially read the essays and provide some useful feedback. But if you don't have that as an option to you, be prepared to spend a lot of time grading and reading, and perhaps get an aid to help you out with those. Let's see. All right, let's do a quick knowledge check on this one. Assessment question types. Here we go. All right, number one, what type of assessment is this? Number two, question two is a blank question type. Oh, I just said it. All right, I'm just gonna give you a few more seconds. All right, I'm gonna take this one to a close. So what type of assessment is this? Number one, that is pretty clearly multiple choice. You had five, six choices available to you. And so yeah, multiple choice. You can only choose one. You only choose one. So that makes it multiple choice. Short answer would not be correct. Oh, let me show the results here. Short answer is not correct, as you're not writing anything in. That's what happens when you do a short answer. You type it in. Now, question number two, this one, you could choose multiples. You can choose multiples. So it is not multiple choice. It is multiple response, because there are multiple answers that are available. Oh, even though Zoom calls that multiple choice. Wait, did that give you multiple choices to choose from? You could select multiple? It should have. That's how I designed it.
Yes, you can pick more than one.
Okay, good. I guess, and that's another thing. I see Zoom. Actually, let me bring it over here if it doesn't say it already. Zoom says multiple choice on there, and this one says single choice. Okay, so it really depends on how you define it. Like I've seen some e-learning platforms and LMSs that have question types in them, and some of them will call both of these multiple choice, but with this one being single choice and this one being multiple choice. It's kind of confusing. I've just called it, if it has a single choice in it, single answer, it's multiple choice because you have multiple items to choose from. But if you have multiple items to choose from and multiple answers possible, then it's multiple response. So this one would be better classified as multiple response and fill in the blank. So you see how you can mix them both together. That's a nice way to potentially create a fill in the blank, and you can give like lots and lots of choices to kind of accomplish two birds with one stone, kill two birds with one stone like that. So, but yeah, pretty good on that one. All right, and that is going to be it for this particular lecture. The readings for this week is chapter 8 and 9 of Addie, Leaving Addie for Sam, and as I said, the instructional analysis and content map is due tonight. 11:59 p.m. And then you can start on the blueprint storyboard learning objectives portion of the assignment. I will try to get feedback on those content maps as soon as possible so that you could, on the content maps as soon as possible, so you can use the feedback in your blueprint storyboard. Now don't leave yet. We're not going to break quite yet, but I will let you know that next module will be examining what comes between you and the learner, which is the instructional interventions. Now, I was going to set you up into breakout rooms, but I'd rather show you the whatchamacallits, the storyboarding, some examples of storyboarding. And bring that up. Actually, let me first show you the documents, the design document template, the storyboard template, and the instruction, the ID outline. All right, so this is the PowerPoint in storyboard template that you could use, and it's already has pre-created slides in it that that you would use to do all your storyboarding. The first one is course details. And this is where you would write, the title, descriptions. You may not need to do this for your particular assignment. In fact, some of them, some items I don't include, like a catalog description. If you end up going to be using this training and putting it into a catalog or in an LMS where you have to have a description, that's where you would type that in. Oops, there's the design document. Okay, then that's you'd put that there. List your stakeholders, who are the primary stakeholders involved in this, the subject matter experts, who your team members are, and the topic type. That would be, is it a process, procedure, principle, something, any or multiple of them, because it could be a large amount of content in the particular course that you're designing. What's the delivery media? You can be doing it as a video, you can do it as an e-learning. You can even use these storyboards to put together other presentations and things like that. So who is the target audience of the training, the duration, and here's where you would write the terminal learning objectives. Keywords is for search engine SEO, search engine optimization, so if you end up going to be pushing this up to an LMS and then people are going to search for it, you would put that there. Now, you do not have to use all of this or fill all these in for your assignment. It's just there for your reference, if in case you find yourself in a position where you need a storyboard that has that information, that needs that information, you can input it there. But otherwise, the content you need for the assignment is listed in the assignment. Now, this is another one on topic structure. So terminal objectives for the course would be written here. Well, in here is where you would write the learning objectives of each topic or each section on your content map. So you would take a portion of your content map and put it into one of these boxes and kind of write, okay, what is the topic of that section of the content map? Provide some definition of what that is about and the learning objectives in that. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. And of course, you can make multiples of these slides. So you got 2 of them, you can do another one. So you can do multiples of them. So if you have more than 4 topics. Then we get into the actual screens. This is what each screen or slide is going to look like, where you'll write OST stands for on-screen text, voiceover or audio. You'd put that in there as well. So if you want any on-screen text, you'd write it there. Any voiceover, you'd be there. And any navigational info, if you're going to be doing e-learning, you would want to write your navigational info on what buttons take you where. And then here's where you can put your content. You can put pictures here, and that's why it's handy to use PowerPoint for this, because you can go over to the stock images that are available in PowerPoint and get some cutout people here and grab somebody, insert them in here, and pop them into place. I'm like, okay, I'm going to use this person. They're going to be standing about right there in this particular frame of the training, and you can even like put action and other things in there. However you want to design that particular slide or screen number, you can do that there. And of course, make more as you need them, and you could have quite a few. quite a few. There is another slide that's specifically set for knowledge checks. So if you do have a knowledge check, which the assignment does require you to have some type of knowledge check, you can use this one. So it's very similar to the other one. It just has options for questions and answers there. It's kind of set up to be a multiple choice, multiple response with corrective feedback or incorrect feedback there. So if somebody gets the answer wrong, they would get that feedback. If they get it, I'm sorry, if they get the answer right, they get that feedback. If they get the answer wrong, they get that feedback. So that's how that one's set up, and then you can put your knowledge checks together that way. There's also a blank slide in case you just wanted to. I always like having a blank slide in my presentations that I will sometimes hide, or as I'm developing, I'll use as kind of a canvas for doing graphical, making strange graphics or putting weird things together. So I just find it's helpful. Or you can just use the blank slide as your storyboard instead of using all of these with all these lines and everything. I'm okay with you just using blank slides to show what you're accomplishing, what each of the panels or screens are going to do. And then you can write in the notes section. So you click on notes down here, and you can write all your on-screen text, voiceover, or put the on-screen text just on there, or write your voiceover and navigational instructions. Your knowledge checks could all be down here in this section. That is a-okay. You can do that. And I'm going to show you an example of that in practice and work here. So let me pull. What's going on? Here we go. So this was actually a project that I did when I was in the program, and this was in an explanatory video on augmented reality gamification. And this is how the storyboard looked. We had our segment, what's kind of going on in it, and just put pictures in there of what's happening with the voiceover down here. And in fact, let me show the video at the same time, because this one follows pretty closely to how it was storyboarded. There's some little differences, and I think you'll notice them. So let's play these at the same time.
Nader is an avid magazine subscriber and loves looking at photos from different publications. He has always admired the compositions and colors of the amazing pictures. He wishes he could have that style and look for his own photographs. He has a nice camera on his phone, but isn't sure where to go from there. Have you ever wanted to try something new, but weren't sure
Here's where I
to get
use
started?
the actual graphics.
Or maybe you've started, but you're not sure how to get better. You can always take a class or hire a private instructor, but that can be expensive and time-consuming. There's a better, more effective way to learn new skills and have fun doing it, all on your own time. It's called augmented reality gamification. Augmented reality technology enriches the real world with digital information and media, such as 3D models and video, overlaid in real time on your mobile digital device. Augmented reality is using your phone to put digital furniture into your home to see if that new couch will fit. It's holding your tablet up to a work of art and getting detailed information on the artist, style, and history. Or it's catching virtual creatures running around in a real, digitally augmented world. Gamification is the application of game-playing elements to non-gaming areas of activity. Gamification
I won't show
is
this whole
checking
thing,
into your
but you can see here how it corresponds pretty closely, but there are some differences. There are little differences, and that always happens when you're designing, when you're storyboarding, going from storyboard to production. You're gonna have some differences that are gonna happen. You just kind of deal with them, but the storyboard provides that nice. Yes. Did I just not share the screen? No, I'm sharing. Okay, good. Sir, do you have a question?
Well, now I have two, now that I've seen the video.
Sure.
So my first question is, so you have clients essentially in your job that you are building training for. So do you present them your storyboard, or do you use the storyboard purely for yourself and your team? And then, like, I mean, obviously we don't present our clients a finished product because it's not finished. They're not going to
Yeah.
like most of it. But at what point do you usually present it to your clients? people?
Depends on what the client, how involved the client wants to be. Always depends on the
Okay.
client. Some want to be super involved. Some don't want to be involved at all. In fact, some, most I've found, if you show them a storyboard, they're going to freak out. They're going to be like, no, that's not the way I want it. Because they can't imagine what the end result's going to be. I use it internally with the team most often, but it really depends on the client. Now, I know we're hitting at the end of the clock right now. So if you have to leave, be my guest. But if you want to stick around, and I'll go over a few more things. But I'll also continue recording this and post this video if you wanted to catch up later. I'm sorry, we're going a little bit later than normal. I know some people might have class right now, so you're welcome to leave if you'd like. Let me quickly answer.
I had one
yes.
more question real quick. It was
Sure,
real quick.
sure.
How did you create this with the people, with the drawing the people? How did you create that?
Oh, like these here?
Yeah.
This, I used a program called, it was basically the same program that's used to do the hand drawing animations. I want to say VideoScribe. That's what it was called.
Correct.
And
Okay, thank you.
so yeah, that was that program. There's a lot of them out there. That's just the one that I ended up using. Brianna's question, does only one team member need to submit the content map assignment? Yes, only one team member needs to submit it because it should submit for the entire group. I have changed the requirements on the assignment so that when one person submits, the whole group submits. But we kind of ran into a snag with one of the groups that submitted early. Hopefully I fixed that. So if one person does submit in the group, I'm just gonna, and it doesn't work that way, I will either let you know or I will take care of the grade so you don't have to all worry about submitting it. In fact, I'd prefer if not everybody submits because I might have to be juggling multiple versions. Don't want to do that. Lori asks, is there an industry standard to present a storyboard in PowerPoint like this? No, I've been finding there is no industry standards across it at all. Every organization I've worked with has a different means of storyboarding, and that's why I was giving you a few different options. There is this one. This one's a very advanced one. Gets into a lot of detail. This was originally created from Philips Informatics. They do X-ray technology, X-ray software. The very, very high-end technical sort of stuff. They have very specific review instructions as part of their projects, their project planning procedures and communication standards. So that's why they required a very specific document like this, but it was just set by that company, and each company will be different. And oftentimes when it comes to training, I mean, it depends on your organization. Some organizations have very robust training departments that have standards in place. Others don't, and most don't, sadly, that I've found, because like my work at NASCO, they didn't really have anything. They really just would throw together presentations and use that. So I brought a lot of these tools with me to up their game, and so it really depends on the organization ultimately, and what are the needs of your stakeholders. So yeah, this is one that you can put the graphics and media here instead of in the slide. You put your expanded or spoken text here, on-screen text here. One of the benefits of using a Word document for your storyboarding is track changes. You can track the changes very successfully in a Word document. I don't think PowerPoint has integrated track changes very efficiently yet. Or even comments are pretty bad. But if you want to track changes in this, I can go to review, select track changes. And now whenever I make a change, it'll note the change. As I was speaking a little earlier about how changes, it says, oh, Kevin did this a few seconds ago. That timestamp will be there so that when you provide these to your subject matter experts for review, you know what they changed. Brianna asks, have you storyboards more in e-learning developments? Easier to build it out in PPT than on the Storyline? Absolutely. I highly recommend using PowerPoint for prototyping. In fact, that's what we're going to be doing in a coming module, is going over prototyping in PowerPoint. And that's actually your final assignment, is doing a PowerPoint prototype of an e-learning. So yeah, absolutely. The last one I'll show you is this ID outline. This is not great for storyboarding, but it's a great transitional point for, and it's just an Excel document, but it has all of the columns here noted for the different sections, the content treatment, which is kind of description of each of the slides, or not necessarily slides, but the topics being addressed, the learning objectives in there, as well as the assessments. Let's see if I can have one that's already built out. I think I do someplace. But this is good if not. Let me think. Actually, where's a good one that I can show you? Stocks. I had one in. Maybe I don't. I might have to table that and get a good one for you. Oh wait, here we go. Mentor outline. There we go. This is part of the mentor training program I developed, and here. And this is, see, it's highly detailed, a lot of fine print, but it's a big program. So I would take the content map and break it down. So this was the module, was in the introduction, module 1 in the content map. And then this was a subsection in that one module on mentor training overview. And then that would break down into these different sections on the content map, but just laid out on this outline, where then I could put in the content treatment for each of those sections, note what are the learning objectives, what is the performance type, is it a concept, is it, oh, these are enabling objectives here, is enabling objectives, what assessment measures were going to be necessary, what references I was going to need, if there was some type of reference to like a standard or whatever, I'd put it there, and then questions I'd ask the SME. So that's an example of using this one. It's not necessarily a storyboard, but it is a helpful document if you want to get into a lot of detail. Not necessary for the assignment. All you need to do for the assignment is create a storyboard either in Word or PowerPoint, and you can use my templates that I provided you, or create your own, like I've done with this one. This was just using a standard template, design template that's in Word or in PowerPoint, and just kept using it. So made it easy, made it real easy. All right, I think that is about it. I will mention one last thing for the final. If anyone's interested, I have a personal learning LMS. It's a marketplace where I am branching out to sell training on this marketplace, very much like Coursera and Skillshare. But I am be happy, and I know not having selling training for you guys, but it's a great platform to put the e-learning prototypes that you design in this class. I can publish them to that as a SCORM file and give you a link so that if it meets the standard and works successfully, you can share that and as a portfolio item. And I can only do that. I can't do that in perpetuity, but I can do that for a good 6 months, host it there. If you needed a place to host projects that you work on in this class, so you can show to other people, maybe possible employers, I could do that for you. But it just has to meet a standard so that it works. It doesn't have to be real nice or anything. It's you're welcome to decide. I'll host just about anything for you, but as long as it works correctly, like the buttons work and everything like that, that's fine. I'd be happy to do that for you. So I'll just throw that out there for you. But otherwise, that's it for class tonight. Thank you for staying a little bit later. I will be at the ATD Mixer on Thursday night. I think it's Thursday night in Mission Valley. If you want to join me, you're welcome to. Otherwise, I will see you next class. And hope to see those assignments submitted tonight. If you need some more time, just reach out to me and I'll work with you on that. But I can't give you too much time because we got to move forward. Running out of time in the semester. So that's it. Thank you very much. Again, I'll stick around a little longer if anybody needs anything.